Now you say, what do you mean by putting yourself in the story? I tell you what it is. And this is controversial today. That's why I only use the Bible and spirit of prophecy. Look on page 151 what I mean by that. After project, look at the paragraph following from Ellen White. We should take the life of Christ point by point and let the imagination grasp each scene. Imagination. Some people are nervous about that word, imagination. We lose many fresh spiritual insights from God that God desires to reveal to us by dwelling on worldly things rather than educating the imagination to dwell upon divine things. Let me just say this about imagination. We all imagine. Even while I'm speaking to you, imagining something. How many, while I'm talking to you, are imagining something about home, your children, grandchildren? Raise your hand. Be honest. Well, all of us, you know. We imagine. We cannot live without imagination. We shouldn't be scared of imagination. The Bible says human imagination became wicked. Ellen White says, educate your imagination to dwell on sacred things. They say the reason actors and actresses make so much money and they're so successful in acting because they take something fictitious and act as if it's real. It's so real on the screen. Our problem as Christians, we take something real about Jesus and we act as if it's not real. Always saying it, take it as real and keep it as real in your life. And she talked about sanctified imagination as we put ourselves into the story. Another one. The bottom of page 151. I'm going too fast here. I shouldn't. Let me take it easy here because I'm looking at the clock. You have no appointments. Can I take 10 extra minutes? Okay. Look at this. The last 4 lines on page 151. Notice what Ellen White counsels us to do as we study the teaching of Jesus to his disciples and the multitude. I'm quoting from her. You see, a transcendental meditation had to do with emptying your mind. Emptying your mind. Finding the God within you. Christian meditation has to be with taking your mind off yourself and focusing on Jesus. Beholding Him, by beholding you become transformed. Satan wants to steal this from us by bringing in Eastern meditation. We're not talking about Eastern meditation. We're talking about meditating on the life of Jesus. By beholding Him, we become changed into His image. So look what she says. The last 4 lines on page 151. Let us in imagination go back to that scene as we sit with the disciples on the mountainside. Enter. You see, it's interesting. Sit with them. That's what I mean by putting ourselves into the story. Sit with the disciples. Enter into the thoughts and feelings that fill their minds. Understanding what the words of Jesus meant to those, top of page 152, heard them, we may discern in them a new vividness and beauty, and may also gather for ourselves the deeper lessons. The last paragraph on that page. All, and in connection with celebrating communion, she counsels us to imagine the sacred scenes in order to awaken living and sacred emotions in our hearts and to keep fresh in memory the scenes of Calvary. For as we receive the bread, now this is what I call sanctified imagination. We put ourselves in the story when we celebrate communion. As we receive the bread and the wine symbolizing Christ's broken body and spilled blood, we in imagination join the scene of communion in the upper chamber. We seem to be passing through the garden. We witness a struggle and Christ is set forth crucified among us. Well, let me tell you how I experienced that. When I was a student at Walla Walla College, I was a freshman, I was a foreign student, didn't have many friends, and we had communion service for the first time as a freshman. I said, Lord, please send somebody who would wash my feet. I don't know, I don't want to be left alone, and I don't want to push myself anybody. A wonderful Christian young man came and asked me if he could wash my feet. And I just want to tell you how this affected me. He asked me to sit down in a chair. He went and got a basin and water in it. And he came down level of my feet and started washing my feet and praying for me. Very sincere young man. Now I could see top of his head. I could see him washing. And the thought crossed my mind as I was contemplating how Jesus washed Judas' feet. This thought just crossed my mind because I'm putting myself in the story. I'm imagining something real. Actually, Jesus washed the feet of his disciple Judas. In my culture, by the way, the head represents the most noble part of the body, the feet the most base part of the body. And when Jesus was touching Judas' feet and getting close to him with his head, he was saying to Judas, Judas, I want my best to reach you at your worst. And I thought to myself, as I look at this young man washing my feet, if I were living during Jesus' time, just like Judas, like Peter, I would have seen a man girded with a towel. I would have been able to see the top of his head as he washed my feet, saying, Philip Samaan, I want my best to reach you at your feet at your worst. I would have asked people, please tell me, who is this kind man washing my feet? And they would have said to me loud and clear, he is Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Can you imagine? In my mind, I was contemplating this. My sanctified imagination was telling me, if you were living during Jesus' time, he would have washed your feet. Can you imagine for a moment God washing our feet? What a thought that can change your life. If he washed the feet of Judas, who was ready to sell him for 30 pieces of silver, he certainly would have washed your feet. Can you imagine? The answer would come back, the Son of God is washing your feet. Oh, I tell you, it made quite an impact on me. I never celebrate that service without thinking about Jesus washing my feet. And he, in fact, was to wash our feet and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So this is what I mean by that. Then there are 4 questions about the story. We'll talk about what story? Mark 4. Jesus stilling the storm in the Sea of Galilee. After we have the 4 P's, we have 4 questions. And these are the questions. And I have spiritual diaries. I tell you, for many, many years I followed this. So I have many, many notebooks filled with stories from life of Jesus, how I study it that way. And these are the 4 questions I asked. Page 154. The first question. Middle of page 154. We're almost concluding here. 154. What does the story teach me about Jesus? So the first question is about Jesus. The second question, what does it teach me about the other disciples, the other characters in the story? And the third question is, what does it teach me about myself? So look at the first 3 questions. Summarize with the word joy. Jesus first, others, and you or me. Joy. Now, why do we ask a question about Jesus first? Because people get together, study the Bible, and they start by talking about their problems, and they become more discouraged and depressed. The first you must talk about is Jesus. Because when you fill your mind with Jesus, what he can do for you, then you see things from his perspective and you're not as discouraged. And now, let us answer these questions. Page 155. And by the way, this comes directly from my spiritual diary that I copied here. The first one. What does it tell me about Jesus? Now notice, as I share these wonderful things about Jesus, your faith is going to be stronger. Because all of us face storms. How many are facing storms today? Small, big, raise your hand. Some kind of a storm. This is for you. And if you haven't faced a storm, you will, I promise you. Life is, that's part of life. You say, well, I didn't do anything wrong. You don't have to do anything wrong. Sometimes storm hits you from nowhere. Look at the first one. The bottom, page 155. This is what I learned about Jesus. Jesus is the creator of all nature. He's the commander of all its forces. He is still in control, and he will still have the last word in my life. So if you're hit with a storm of sickness, for example, or financial collapse, or losing your job, hey, wait a minute. My boss says this, the doctor says the other. All I want you to know is Jesus is my great physician, and he will have the final say in my life. Just say this to yourself. Christ will have the final word. One of my students came to me and said, the doctor told her that she has 3 months to live. You know, if I were a doctor, I wouldn't really say that. said, Dr. Samaan, I'm scared to death. I'm only 22 years old and I have cancer and I haven't lived my life. And she was devastated. I said, young lady, all I can tell you is about the great physician Jesus. Your doctor gave his word. The great physician Jesus will have the final word. Let's come and anoint you in the name of Christ. Let us take our weak prayers, unite them to the mighty prayers of Jesus. Let's take our smelly prayers and saturate them with the all-sufficient fragrant incense of the altar of Christ's prayers. So we did that. And we entrust her case to Jesus. And she's been living for the last 18 years in very tremendous health. Remember, build up your faith by talking about Jesus first. Often when we face a storm, what do? We spend our precious time consulting the experts, talking to people. Wait a minute, before you talk to anybody else, talk to Jesus. Jesus will have the final word. You see, as you think about that, you begin to have courage and your faith is built up. The second one, Jesus is bigger than any storm I'm facing. In my diary, I put the word bigger in capital letters. I highlight them over and over. I underline with yellow and purple and green and blue till you could see through the page, because I was going through a big storm and I was trying to emphasize into my heart, Jesus is bigger than the storm you face. He is bigger. So whatever storm you're facing, He's bigger than that. He's bigger than that. That builds up your faith. Then, at the following page, number 3, Jesus doesn't abandon ship during a storm. Whenever you face a storm, He is with you. Even if you don't feel His presence, He is with you, because He's a good captain. And good captains do not abandon ship. Like this luxury liner in Italy, where the captain took a lifeboat and his assist to lifeboats and left the passenger to drown. You remember this happened just this year, beginning of this year? Remember what happened? The police chief of the city in Italy, you could hear the taping. He was cussing, he was swearing. He said, if you don't go inside the ship and help the passenger survive, you are going to deal with me and I'm going to put you in prison. Get in there. That's not a good captain. Oh, thank God. Jesus is a good captain. He's the captain of my life when I'm facing a storm, and He never, ever abandons me during a storm. He doesn't. I might feel so, like the disciples, but He's in the middle of the boat. He's in the middle of my life. Number 4, you see, don't you feel your faith is beginning to grow now? By focusing on Jesus first? And then you go to number 4. Jesus is there with me, even sometimes I don't feel His presence. 5, Jesus is indeed the Prince of Peace in the midst of chaos, fear, hopelessness. He is always calm. Absolutely nothing can make Him lose His composure. Isn't that wonderful? When you're facing a storm and people being bent out of shape, you become discouraged and nervous about things. And Jesus, the Prince of Peace, stands up in your life. Stands in the midst of your storm. Isn't that wonderful? He's calm, He's collected. He's the Prince of Peace. That's the kind of person you want to have during a storm. And He stands up, and He is the one who created the wind, the water. And He raises His hand. Peace be still. That's the kind of person you have in Jesus. What does it teach you about Jesus? He is my Prince of Peace. And on. You could read the rest of it. And I take this to heart. And I apply this to every story about Jesus. The first 4 P's: prepare my heart. The questions is to focus on Jesus first. And then what's the second question? What does it tell me about the disciples? You see, first of all, I want to know what Jesus has to offer. What about the disciples? Oh, they were very spiritual when there was no storm. When everything was calm, it's so easy to be spiritual. But when you're hit with a storm from nowhere, you lose your composure and you try to resist Satan without submitting to Jesus. You even forgot about Jesus. That's what happens to you when you try to help yourself without submitting to Jesus. You become desperate. You despair. You're ready to perish. In the darkness, as they were desperate trying to save the boat, they stumbled over Jesus and they were upset with Jesus. What's the matter? Don't you care that we perish? And Jesus stood up. He didn't rebuke them, he rebuked the wind. Often we rebuke each other, we criticize each other, we condemn each other. Jesus condemns the storm. Don't kick somebody when he's down. Jesus doesn't kick people when they're down. He focuses on the solution. What do we have going for us? Oh, there's a storm. I'll deal with the storm. You know, I remember at the camp meeting, I was preaching at the camp meeting, and there's a couple with some children. And I know they're conservative Adventists. I'm conservative. I think they carry too far. You know, I'm not against spanking children. I think that's the last resort. I mean, sometimes that's what works. But today, parents have to be afraid. Like this father talked to me, he said, you know, my son is so rowdy.